operations. We've talked about how we can add, subtract, multiply, and divide with those. We talked about the domains. When you add, subtract, multiply, the domain is the same. You just take the overlap, everything that works for the two individual ones. And when you divide, we also had to make sure that the denominator wasn't going to be 0. So I want to see if we can do these function operations when we maybe don't just have equations, when I give you different representations of our function. So the first one, I gave you a graph. When I ask for f plus g of 1, that means you take f of 1. So when x is 1, what's the y value of f? That's a positive 3. Plus g of 1. When x is 1, the y value of g is 1. And then 3 plus 1 is 4. So f minus g is 0. F of 0. When x is 0, f is 4, minus, when x is 0, g is 0. 4 minus 0 is 4. F times g of negative 1. So when x is negative 1, f is what? 3. G is 1. 3 times 1 is 3. Last one, f divided by g of negative 2. So f of negative 2 is 0 divided by g of negative 2 is 2, and you get 0. So what these are your x's, you're finding your y's. I want you guys to try to do those with b. So that time I gave you a table. So f plus g of 1 says x is 1. So at that point f is 1, g is 6, and we get 7. F minus g is 0. So f is negative 1 minus g is 4. We get negative 5. F times g of negative 1. So f is negative 3, g is 2, and you get negative 6. F divided by g of negative 2. So f is negative 5 divided by 0, which is just no solution. You can't divide by 0. Okay. Maybe we should go ahead and do, just as a refresher from Friday, here are 2 equations. I want you to find those 4 things with those equations. F plus g of 1, if you plug in a 1 to f, 3 plus 4 is 7. Put a 1 into g, you get negative 1. So that gives us 6. F minus g of 0. F of 0 is 4. G of 0 is 0, so you get 4. F times g of negative 1. So f of negative 1 is 1. G of negative 1 is the opposite of the absolute value. Absolute value of negative 1 is 1. The opposite of that is negative 1. We get negative 1. F divided by g of negative 2. So f of negative 2 negative 2. G of negative 2, the opposite of the absolute value, will be a negative 2. You get 1. Questions there? Are we all right with these evaluating? Okay. The next thing I want to do, it goes along the lines of evaluating functions, but I'm going to ask for 3 parts. We're going to find f of x plus h first. That means when you go to your equation, you plug in x plus h in for your x. So every x gets an x plus h. How do you take x plus h and square that? FOIL it. It's like saying there are 2 of them. So if you FOIL that, you get x squared plus xh and plus xh would be 2xh plus h squared. We distribute. So what we're working towards is being able to simplify this final fraction here. This is something that pops up a lot in calculus. It actually has a meaning to it. So that's why we're kind of practicing these problems now. It's just a matter of simplifying functions. So if you break it into pieces, you first find f of x plus h. It's not pretty. That doesn't matter. The second thing we're going to do is f of x plus h minus the f of x. So f of x plus h is what we just worked out. So you're just taking your answer from the first one, carrying that down. Minus f of x is just the original function. Now if I do that, what happens? What do we need to do? If I take that negative through, 2x squared and negative 2x squared would cancel. Negative 3x and positive 3x cancel. So I'm left with 4xh plus 2h squared minus 3h. The final thing I'm asking you to do is f of x plus h minus f of x all over h. All that means is the answer you just got divided by h. Now if you've done it right, when you get to this point, you're always going to be able to cancel out some h's. If I divide each of those things on top by h, 4xh divided by h would just be 4x. 2h squared divided by h, 2h, minus 3h divided by h is 3. Okay. So the work is a little bit ugly, but the final answer should come out to be fairly decent. Want to do another one? I want to do this one. So, the first part, is f of x plus h. I should have said f of x equals that. So, all that means is we are going to go to our function. We're going to change the x to an x plus h. Simplify as much as you can, so all we can do is distribute that -4. So you get 5 minus 4x minus 4h. Part B, what do we have to do?
Try to help x.
The f of x plus h minus the f of x. So the answer we just got minus f of x was the original, 5 minus 4x. I'm not going to expect you to remember, you know, first find f of x plus h, second find this. I will ask it just the way I did in this example. So I'll say first find f of x plus h, second find f of x plus h minus f of x. So if we distribute our negative, positive 5 and negative 5 cancel, negative 4x and positive 4x cancel, and we get negative 4h. The last thing you're asked to find is f of x plus h minus f of x all over h. So that's the answer we just got, divided by h, which gives us a negative 4. So all we're doing here is evaluating functions. Is that okay with everybody? The last thing I want to look at is composing functions. So let's say f of x is 2x squared minus 3. G of x is a 4x. When I say f and then you have this little circle, what does that mean? It's composite. Do you guys remember these?
You put the g function in place of x.
This means f of g of x. Order matters with these. If I did g composed with f, that's g of x of x. You start on the inside, or you start with the second one. So work that, get that answer, and plug it into the next one. So when I say f composed with g of 1, that means f of g of 1. You work inside out, so g of 1. If I go to g and I plug a 1 in for my x, what do we get? 4. So then we have f of 4. So I'm going to f, if I plug a 4 in for my x, 4 squared is 16, times 2 is 32, minus 3 is 29. So B, will I get the same answer if I flip the order? Not usually. This means g of f of 1. Start on the inside, f of 1. So if I go to f and I plug a 1 in for my x, we get 2 minus 3 is negative 1. Then you go to g, and you plug in a negative 1, and we get negative 4. You don't have to plug into different functions. I could say, what if I said f composed with f of 0? What does that mean?
You would solve f of 0 and put that answer into f.
Perfect. So f of 0, if I plug a 0 into f, I get -3. Then f of -3, if you plug a -3 in, -3 squared is 9, times 2 is 18, minus 3 is 15. So you can plug into the same function repeatedly. Are there questions on anything that I've covered today? We have a lot of time left. Are you guys okay with just getting your homework and looking on that? Nobody's going to be offended? I did type a